The lightning split the Wyoming sky so bright, it turned midnight into noon for half a heartbeat. And Warren Lancaster thought he saw something move near the old abandoned trapper's cabin up ahead on the ridge. He pulled his dun mare to a halt, squinting through the rain that came down in sheets so thick he could barely see past his horse's ears. The storm had caught him returning from delivering a string of horses to Fort Laramie, and he had been riding hard trying to reach his ranch before the worst of it hit. But that plan had failed spectacularly about an hour ago when the heavens opened up like someone had torn a hole straight through them. Another flash of lightning illuminated the landscape, and this time Warren was certain. There was definitely someone or something near that cabin. His hand instinctively moved to the rifle in his saddle scabbard, but he did not draw it. Out here in the Wyoming Territory in the summer of 1878, you had to be cautious, but you also had to be decent. If someone was caught in this storm, they needed help, and Warren had been raised to offer it. He urged his mare forward, the animal reluctant but obedient. The rain pelted his oilskin duster, running off the brim of his hat in a continuous stream. The cabin loomed out of the darkness, its roof half caved in on one side but the other half still standing after all these years. Warren dismounted, his boots squelching in the mud, and led his horse toward what remained of the lean-to that had once served as a stable. That was when he heard it, a sound that made his heart clench with something he could not quite name. Someone was crying, the sound barely audible over the roar of wind and rain, but unmistakably human and unmistakably frightened. Warren secured his horse quickly and moved toward the cabin door, or what was left of it. The wood hung crookedly on one hinge, and he could see through the gap that someone had built a small fire inside, though it was struggling against the rain that poured through the broken roof. He knocked on the doorframe, not wanting to startle whoever was inside. The crying stopped immediately, replaced by a tense silence that felt even worse somehow. "Hello in there," Warren called out, keeping his voice steady and calm. "I do not mean any harm. Just saw you were caught in the storm same as me. Mind if I come in out of the rain?" The silence stretched out so long he thought maybe he had imagined the crying. But then a voice answered, shaky and small but trying hard to sound firm. "Stay back. I have a weapon." Warren almost smiled at that, though there was nothing amusing about the fear he heard beneath the bravado. "I am sure you do, and I am sure you know how to use it, but I am still getting soaked out here and I would appreciate being able to dry off some. I've got supplies in my saddlebags, coffee, some jerky, hardtack, happy to share." Another long pause. "Then, you can come in. But keep your hands where I can see them." Warren pushed the door open carefully and stepped inside, raising his hands to shoulder height. The fire was in the center of the room where the roof still held, and huddled on the far side of it was a young woman who looked like she had been through 7 kinds of hell. Her dress was torn and muddy, her dark hair hung in wet tangles around her face, and she held a rusty old pistol in both hands, aimed directly at his chest. Even in the dim firelight, Warren could see her hands were shaking. "Easy now," he said softly, keeping his hands up. "I am Warren Lancaster. I have got a horse ranch about 10 miles south of here. Was heading home from Fort Laramie when this storm caught me. What is your name?" The woman stared at him with wide eyes, and Warren found himself taking in more details despite the situation. She was young, probably in her early 20s, with striking features that would have been beautiful if they were not currently twisted with fear and exhaustion. Her dress, beneath all the mud and damage, had once been a nice one, the kind you might wear to church or a social gathering in town. "Penelope," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Penelope Barrett. Well, Miss Barrett, I am going to lower my hands now and take off this wet duster, if that is all right with you. Then I would like to go back out and get my saddlebags. We can share what food I have got, and we can wait out this storm together. That sound acceptable? Penelope did not lower the gun, but she gave a small nod. Warren moved slowly, shrugging out of his duster and hanging it on a nail that still protruded from the wall. His clothes underneath were damp, but not soaked through. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that was starting to show just a touch of gray at the temples despite him being only 32. He went back out into the storm and retrieved his saddlebags, moving his horse a bit closer to the cabin where there was slightly more shelter. When he returned, Penelope had lowered the gun slightly, though she still held it ready. Warren noticed her arms were trembling with the effort of keeping it up. "That thing loaded?" he asked conversationally as he set his saddlebags down and moved to sit on the opposite side of the fire from her. Penelope's jaw tightened. "No." Warren nodded as if she had said yes. "Well, you held it like someone who knew what they were doing. That is what counts." He rummaged in his saddlebags and pulled out his supplies, laying them out between them. "I've got some coffee here if we can get some water boiling. You got anything to cook in?" "There is an old pot in the corner," Penelope said, still not moving. "I found it when I got here. I cleaned it out as best I could. That will do fine." Warren retrieved the pot, went back out into the storm to fill it with rainwater, which was coming down clean and cold, and set it on rocks near the fire to boil. Throughout all of this, he moved calmly and deliberately, making no sudden movements, giving Penelope time to get used to his presence. Finally, she set the gun down beside her, though she kept her hand near it. Warren pretended not to notice. "You want to tell me what has got you so scared?" he asked quietly. "Might help to talk about it." Penelope wrapped her arms around herself, and for a moment Warren thought she would not answer. Then the words came spilling out in a rush, as if she had been holding them in for so long they could not be contained anymore. "I was traveling with my uncle from Petaluma, California to Cheyenne. He had business there, and I was going to stay with his family. We were on the stage 3 days ago when it was held up by outlaws." Her voice caught, and she took a shaky breath before continuing. "They killed the driver and the guard. My uncle tried to protect me, and they shot him too. They took everything of value, and then they took me." Warren felt anger burn hot in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral, letting her talk. "There were 4 of them. They kept me for 2 days, moving from place to place. They argued about what to do with me. Some of them wanted to ransom me, but the leader said my uncle was dead and nobody would pay for me. Last night they got drunk and started fighting among themselves. One of them, the youngest one, he did not seem as cruel as the others. When the fighting got bad, he helped me escape. Gave me the gun, though he said it was not loaded. Told me to run and not stop running." "So you have been on foot for how long?" Warren asked. "Since last night." "I walked all through the night and all through today. I was trying to reach Cheyenne, but I do not even know if I am going the right direction. Then the storm came and I found this place." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Warren saw the exhaustion and despair in her eyes. "How do I know you are telling the truth? How do I know you are not one of them, or worse?" It was a fair question, and Warren respected her for asking it straight out. "You do not know," he said honestly. "You have got no reason to trust me except my word, and I know that is not worth much to a stranger, but I give you my word anyway. I am not going to hurt you. I am going to help you get to Cheyenne safely, and I am going to make sure those men who took you face justice." Penelope's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. "My uncle is dead. They killed him right in front of me, and there was nothing I could do." "I am sorry," Warren said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "I am truly sorry for your loss." They sat in silence for a while as the water heated. The storm raged outside, wind howling through the broken parts of the cabin, but the fire held steady. When the water boiled, Warren made coffee, strong and bitter, and handed Penelope a tin cup. She took it with both hands, holding it close to her face and breathing in the steam. "When did you last eat?" Warren asked. "Yesterday morning. The young one who helped me escape, he gave me some bread before I left, but I ate it all by noon." Warren handed her the jerky and hardtack. It was not much, but it was something. Penelope ate slowly at first, then faster as her hunger took over. Warren watched her carefully, his mind already working through what needed to happen next. "Cheyenne is about 40 miles northeast of here," he said once she had finished eating. "But my ranch is closer and it would be safer to take you there first. You need rest, clean clothes, a real meal. Then we can get you to Cheyenne to the law and figure out what comes next." Penelope looked at him warily. "I do not know you." "No, you do not. But you also do not have a lot of options right now. You are exhausted, you are on foot with no supplies, and those men who took you might still be looking for you. At my ranch, there is my foreman Jake Mitchell and his wife Rose. Rose will take good care of you. You will have a room to yourself with a lock on the door. You can rest and recover, and then we will get you where you need to go." Penelope was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. Warren could see the struggle playing out on her face. She had been through something terrible, and trusting anyone right now went against every instinct she had. But she was also smart enough to know she could not survive out here alone. "All right," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "I will go with you to your ranch. But if you try anything, I will run, and I will keep running until I find help." "That is fair," Warren said. "I would not expect anything less." They finished their coffee in silence, and Warren added more wood to the fire. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and they were stuck here for the night whether they liked it or not. Warren offered Penelope his bedroll, but she refused at first, saying she could sleep sitting up. He insisted, spreading it out on the driest part of the floor, and eventually exhaustion won out and she lay down, still wearing her torn and muddy dress. Warren sat with his back against the wall, his rifle across his lap, keeping watch through the long night. He dozed off and on, but he never fully slept. Every time Penelope stirred or made a sound in her sleep, he was instantly alert. She had nightmares, crying out several times, and each time Warren spoke quietly to her until she settled again, though he never moved from his spot across the room. When dawn finally broke, gray and sullen, the storm had passed. Penelope woke slowly, disoriented for a moment before memory came flooding back. She sat up quickly, looking around until she spotted Warren still in the same position, watching the door. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked. "Enough," he said, which was not really an answer. He stood and stretched, his muscles stiff from the uncomfortable position. "How are you feeling?" "Tired, sore, but better than yesterday." She looked down at her ruined dress. "I must look terrible." "You look like someone who has survived something terrible," Warren said. "There is a difference." He offered her what was left of the jerky for breakfast, and they shared more coffee made from the rainwater that had collected in the pot overnight. When they were ready to leave, Warren brought his horse around and helped Penelope mount. She was unsteady, and he could tell riding was not something she did often. He swung up behind her, reaching around to hold the reins, and felt her stiffen. "I am just steadying you," he said quietly. "You will fall off otherwise, as tired as you are. If you would rather walk, we can do that, but it will take a lot longer." Penelope relaxed slightly. "No, this is fine. I just need to get used to it." They rode out into the morning, the ground still muddy from the storm. Warren kept the pace slow and steady, mindful of Penelope's exhaustion and her inexperience with riding. She sat stiffly in front of him for the first hour, but gradually she began to relax, the rhythm of the horse's gait and the warmth of the sun starting to work their magic. "Tell me about your ranch," she said after a while, perhaps needing the distraction of conversation. "It is not much yet," Warren said. "About 500 acres, good grazing land. I have been building it up for the past 8 years since I mustered out of the cavalry. I raise horses, mostly for the army but also for ranchers and anyone else who needs good, solid working animals. I have got about 80 head right now, plus a few cattle for our own use. You said there was a foreman and his wife, Jake and Rose. They have been with me for 6 years now. Good people. Jake is the best hand with horses I have ever seen, and Rose can out-cook anyone in 3 counties. They have got a little house on the property, just past the main barn. The main house is where I live. It is not fancy, but it is solid and comfortable." Penelope was quiet for a moment. "What made you decide to raise horses?" "I grew up on a farm in Missouri, and I always had a way with animals. When I joined the cavalry, I worked with the horses more than anything else. After the war and all the fighting that came after, I wanted something peaceful, something that made sense. Horses made sense to me. They are honest creatures. You treat them right and they will give you everything they have got." "That sounds nice," Penelope said wistfully. "Something peaceful." Warren heard the longing in her voice and felt a surge of protectiveness that surprised him with its intensity. This woman had been through hell, and she deserved peace, deserved safety, deserved to feel secure again. He made a silent promise to himself that he would do everything in his power to give her that, at least for as long as she was under his care. They rode for most of the day, stopping occasionally to rest and water the horse. Penelope dozed off several times, leaning back against Warren's chest without seeming to realize it. Each time she did, he adjusted his hold slightly to make sure she would not slip, careful not to wake her. She needed the rest desperately. It was late afternoon when the ranch finally came into view. It sat in a valley between low hills, with a creek running through the property. The main house was a sturdy log structure with a stone chimney and a wide front porch. The barn was new, the wood still light-colored, and several corrals spread out around it. Horses grazed in the nearest pasture, their heads lifting curiously as Warren and Penelope approached. Jake Mitchell emerged from the barn as they rode up, a stocky man in his mid-40s with graying hair and a weather-beaten face. His eyes widened when he saw Penelope, and he hurried over to help. "Boss, what happened?" he asked, reaching up to steady Penelope as Warren dismounted. "Long story." "Where is Rose?" "Up at the house, starting supper." Jake's expression was concerned as he looked at Penelope, taking in her torn dress and exhausted state. "Miss, can you walk?" "I think so," Penelope said, but when Warren helped her down from the horse, her legs nearly buckled. He caught her easily, steadying her. "I have got you," he said quietly. "Jake, can you see to the mare? I am going to get Miss Barrett up to the house." "On it, boss." Jake took the horse's reins, still looking worried, but he did not ask any more questions. Warren supported Penelope as they walked to the house, her steps unsteady after so many hours in the saddle. They climbed the porch steps slowly, and Warren called out as he opened the door. "Rose, I need you." Rose Mitchell appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a plump, cheerful woman with kind eyes and graying brown hair pulled back in a bun. One look at Penelope and her expression shifted from surprise to immediate concern. "Oh, you poor dear," she said, hurrying over. "What happened?" "Never mind, you can tell us later. Let me get you cleaned up and into some proper clothes. Can you make it up the stairs?" "I think so," Penelope said, though she swayed on her feet. Warren did not hesitate. He swept her up into his arms, ignoring her startled gasp. "I will carry you." "Rose, which room?" "The blue room at the end of the hall. I will get water heating for a bath." Rose bustled ahead of them, already planning and organizing. Warren carried Penelope up the stairs as if she weighed nothing, despite her protests that she could walk. He set her down gently on the bed in the blue room, a pleasant space with cheerful curtains and a colorful quilt. "Rose will take care of you," he said. "You are safe here, Penelope. I promise you that." She looked up at him, and for the first time since he had found her, some of the fear had left her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Warren nodded and left the room, closing the door behind him. He stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to Rose's cheerful chatter as she helped Penelope out of her ruined dress. Something had shifted inside him during that long ride, something he could not quite name, but that he knew was significant. This woman had come into his life in the worst possible circumstances, but now that she was here, he found he did not want her to leave. That thought should have worried him. Instead, it felt strangely right. Warren went back downstairs and found Jake waiting in the kitchen. He poured them both coffee and sat down at the sturdy wooden table, suddenly aware of how tired he was. "All right, boss," Jake said. "What happened?" Warren told him everything Penelope had shared, watching Jake's expression darken with anger as the story unfolded. "Those bastards," Jake said when Warren finished. "Pardon my language, but that is what they are. We need to get word to the marshal in Cheyenne." "I know. I will ride in tomorrow, but first I want to make sure Penelope is settled and safe. She has been through enough. She does not need to be dragged into town and made to tell her story over and over again to every lawman who wants to hear it, at least not right away." Jake studied him for a long moment. "You like her?" "I just met her, Jake. I do not even know her." "That does not answer my question." Warren stood and walked to the window, looking out at the ranch he had built with his own 2 hands. "She deserves better than what happened to her. She deserves to feel safe again. If I can give her that, I am going to." "That is not what I asked, but all right." Jake drained his coffee. "Rose and I will help however we can. That girl needs looking after, and Rose is the best there is at that." Over the next few hours, Rose worked her magic. She helped Penelope bathe and washed her hair, getting out all the mud and tangles. She dressed her in one of her own dresses, which was a bit large but clean and whole. She fed her soup and fresh bread, making sure she ate slowly so as not to make herself sick. And she talked to her, gently drawing out bits of her story, offering comfort without pushing too hard. By the time Warren knocked on the bedroom door that evening, Penelope looked like a different person. She was still pale and there were shadows under her eyes, but the wild, hunted look was gone. She sat in a chair by the window, wearing Rose's blue dress, her dark hair braided and hanging over one shoulder. "How are you feeling?" Warren asked from the doorway. "Much better. Rose has been wonderful. She is treating me like I am family." "That is just how Rose is. May I come in?" "I wanted to talk to you about what happens next." Penelope nodded, and Warren entered, leaving the door open for propriety's sake. He pulled up another chair and sat across from her. "Tomorrow I am going to ride into Cheyenne and talk to the marshal about what happened. I will tell him everything you told me and we will start looking for those men, but you do not have to come with me if you are not ready. You can stay here as long as you need to." "I should come," Penelope said, though her voice lacked conviction. "I should tell them myself." "You should do what is best for you. The law will want your statement eventually, but there is no rush. A few days to recover, to feel safe again, that will not hurt anything. Those men do not know where you are. You are safe here." Penelope looked out the window at the setting sun. "I do not have anywhere to go. My uncle was my only family. I was going to stay with his family in Cheyenne, but I do not even know them. They were expecting me to arrive with my uncle, not alone with news of his death. Then stay here, Warren said simply, for as long as you need to. We have got plenty of room and Rose would love the company. When you are ready, we will figure out what comes next, but you do not have to do it all right now. Penelope turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. Why are you being so kind to me? You do not know me. I am just some stranger you found in a storm. Warren thought about his answer carefully. Maybe that is exactly why. I was riding home in a storm and I found someone who needed help. Out here, that is what you do, you help. And maybe I am being a bit selfish too. This ranch, it is my home and I love it, but it can be lonely sometimes. Having someone new around, someone who appreciates what we have got here, that is nice. I do appreciate it, Penelope said softly. More than I can say. You saved my life, Warren. If you had not come along, I do not know what would have happened to me. But I did come along. And you are safe now. That is what matters. They sat together in comfortable silence as darkness fell outside. Rose came up eventually and shooed Warren out, saying Penelope needed rest. Warren went to his own room, but sleep was a long time coming. He lay in bed listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling, but his mind was full of a pair of frightened eyes that had gradually softened into something warmer. The next morning, Warren rode into Cheyenne alone, leaving Penelope in Rose's capable hands. The ride took several hours, and he spent most of it thinking about what he would say to the marshal. Cheyenne was a bustling town, growing rapidly with the railroad and the influx of settlers. The marshal's office was on the main street, a sturdy building with barred windows. Marshal Tom Granger was a hard man in his 50s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much violence. But he listened carefully as Warren told him Penelope's story, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. I will put out wanted notices for these men, Granger said when Warren finished. But I have got to be honest with you, Lancaster. With the girl's uncle dead and no other witnesses, it is going to be hard to bring them to justice even if we catch them. It is her word against theirs, and a lot of judges would not take that seriously. Warren felt anger burn in his chest, but he kept his voice level. So you are saying they will get away with murder and kidnapping? I am saying it will not be easy, but I will do everything I can. Have the girl come in when she is ready to give her statement. The more details she can provide, the better chance we have. Warren left the marshal's office feeling frustrated and angry. He knew Granger was right, knew that justice in the Wyoming territory could be hard to come by, especially for a woman with no family and no resources. But that did not make it any easier to accept. He stopped by the general store to pick up some supplies before heading back to the ranch. The proprietor, a friendly man named Bill Henderson, chatted with him as he filled the order. Heard you were in talking to the marshal, Henderson said, his tone casual but his eyes curious. Trouble? Something like that, Warren said noncommittally. He did not want Penelope's story spread all over town. Well, if you need anything, you just let me know. You have been a good customer, Lancaster. I am always happy to help. Warren thanked him and loaded his supplies onto his horse. He was about to mount up when he spotted a dress shop across the street. On impulse, he went in, feeling awkward and out of place among all the fabric and frills. The shopkeeper, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a kind smile, helped him select a few dresses that might fit Penelope, along with some other necessities. He paid for them without haggling, despite the prices being higher than he had expected, and left feeling even more awkward but satisfied. It was late afternoon when he got back to the ranch. He found Penelope in the kitchen with Rose, helping to prepare supper. She looked up when he entered, and a smile crossed her face that made something warm bloom in his chest. "How did it go?" she asked. "The marshal is putting out notices. He will need you to come in and give a statement when you are ready, but there is no rush." He set the packages on the table. "I picked up some things for you in town, dresses and such. Rose can help you sort through them." Penelope's eyes widened as Rose opened the packages, revealing several nice dresses in various colors. "Warren, you should not have. This is too much." "You need clothes," he said simply. "You cannot keep wearing Rose's dresses, though she has been generous in lending them. These are yours." Penelope came around the table, and before Warren knew what she was doing, she hugged him. It was quick and impulsive, and she stepped back almost immediately, her cheeks flushing. "Thank you for everything. I do not know how I will ever repay you." "You do not need to repay me," Warren said, acutely aware of Rose watching them with barely concealed amusement. "I am just glad I could help." Over the next few weeks, Penelope settled into life at the ranch. She helped Rose with cooking and household chores, insisting that she earn her keep. She learned to bake bread and make preserves, to mend clothes and tend the vegetable garden. Rose taught her patiently, clearly delighted to have another woman around. But it was the time Penelope spent with Warren that began to mean the most to her. In the evenings, after supper, they would sit on the porch and talk. Warren told her about his time in the cavalry, about the battles he had fought and the friends he had lost. He told her about deciding to leave that life behind and build something peaceful here in Wyoming. He spoke of his dreams for the ranch, his plans to expand and build a reputation for raising the best horses in the territory. Penelope, in turn, shared her own story. She had grown up in Petaluma, California, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a shopkeeper. Her parents had died of influenza when she was 17, leaving her in the care of her uncle, her father's brother. He had been kind but distant, a businessman more comfortable with ledgers than with raising a young woman. When he had decided to relocate his business to Cheyenne, he had brought her along, promising she could stay with his family there and perhaps find a husband among the young men of the growing town. "I was not particularly excited about that plan," Penelope admitted one evening as they sat watching the sunset. "I did not want to be married off to someone I did not know just because it was convenient. I wanted something more, something real." "What do you want?" Warren asked. Penelope was quiet for a long moment. "I want to matter to someone. I want to build a life with someone who sees me, really sees me, not just as an obligation or a convenience. I want to wake up every morning and feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be." Warren looked at her, at the way the setting sun caught in her dark hair and made her eyes shine, and he realized with startling clarity that he was falling in love with her. It had happened gradually, over these past weeks of shared meals and evening conversations, of watching her laugh at Jake's terrible jokes and help Rose in the kitchen. It had happened in the quiet moments when she had begun to trust him, to let down her guard and show him who she really was beneath the fear and trauma. "I think you are very easy to see," he said quietly. "You are strong and kind and brave. Any man would be lucky to have you choose him." Penelope's breath caught and she turned to look at him fully. "Warren, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know that I see you, and what I see is remarkable." The air between them felt charged, full of possibilities and unspoken feelings. But Warren did not push. Penelope had been through too much, needed more time to heal. Whatever might grow between them, it had to grow at her pace, on her terms. A few days later, Penelope finally felt ready to go into Cheyenne and give her statement to Marshal Granger. Warren accompanied her, and Rose came along as well for support. The marshal was gentle in his questioning, but it was still hard for Penelope to relive those terrible days. She described the outlaws as best she could, giving details about their appearances and their voices, the places they had taken her. When it was over, she was exhausted and shaking. Warren wanted to take her straight back to the ranch, but she insisted on one more stop. She asked him to take her to the address her uncle had given her, where his family lived. The house was a nice one on a quiet street, 2 stories with a white picket fence. Warren knocked on the door, and a woman in her 40s answered, looking curious until Penelope introduced herself. "Oh my goodness," the woman said, her hand flying to her mouth. "You are Charles's niece. We have been so worried. When you did not arrive on the stage, we did not know what to think. Where is Charles?" Penelope's eyes filled with tears, and Warren stepped closer to her side, offering silent support. "I am so sorry. There was an attack. My uncle, he did not make it." The woman, who introduced herself as Margaret Harrison, Charles Barrett's business partner's wife, ushered them inside. Over tea in a pleasant parlor, Penelope told the story again, with Warren and Rose sitting on either side of her. Margaret was sympathetic but also clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. "This is terrible, just terrible," she kept saying. "Poor Charles. And you, my dear, what an ordeal. But you are safe now, and that is what matters. You can stay with us, of course. That was the original plan." But something in Margaret's tone rang false to Penelope, and Warren heard it too. This was a woman doing her duty, fulfilling an obligation, not someone genuinely welcoming Penelope into her family. "That is very kind of you," Penelope said carefully. "But I have been staying at Warren's ranch, and Rose has been teaching me so much. Perhaps it would be better if I continued to stay there, at least for a little while longer, until I figure out what I want to do." Margaret looked relieved, though she tried to hide it. "Well, if that is what you prefer. Of course, you must do what is best for you. But if you need anything, please let us know." They left soon after, and Warren could see the hurt in Penelope's eyes, though she tried to hide it. "She did not really want me there," Penelope said quietly as they drove the wagon back toward the ranch, Rose having decided to do some shopping and catch a ride back later with Jake. "No, she did not," Warren said honestly. "But that is her loss, not yours. You have a place at the ranch for as long as you want it. I cannot stay there forever, Warren. It is not right. I need to figure out my own life." "Why can it not be right? Rose loves having you there. Jake thinks you are good luck because his favorite mare finally foaled after you started helping in the barn, and I—" He paused, then forged ahead. "I like having you there. The ranch feels more like a home with you in it." Penelope looked at him, her eyes wide. "Warren, what are you saying?" "I am saying that I have feelings for you, Penelope. Strong feelings. I know it has not been very long, and I know you have been through something terrible. I am not trying to rush you or pressure you, but I also do not want to hide how I feel. You make me happy. You make the ranch feel complete in a way it never did before. If you want to stay not as a guest but as someone who belongs there, I would like that very much." "As what?" Penelope asked, her voice barely a whisper. "As a housekeeper, a cook, as my wife if you will have me. But only if that is what you want too. Only if you can see a future with me." Penelope was quiet for so long that Warren thought he had made a terrible mistake, had pushed too hard too fast. But then she reached over and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I can see a future with you," she said softly. "I have been seeing it for weeks now, even though I tried not to. I told myself it was too soon, that I was just grateful to you for saving me. But it is more than that. You make me feel safe, but you also make me feel alive. You see me, really see me, like I said I wanted. And I see you too, Warren Lancaster. I see a good man who works hard and cares deeply and builds things that last. Yes, I will marry you. if you are sure that is what you want." "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," Warren said, and he pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the road and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and when they finally pulled apart, Penelope was smiling through happy tears. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Cheyenne. Rose and Jake stood up with them, beaming with pride and happiness. A few neighbors attended, and Marshall Granger even showed up, having grown fond of Penelope during her visits to give additional information about the outlaws. Penelope wore one of the dresses Warren had bought her, a beautiful blue one that matched her eyes. Warren wore his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed and his boots polished. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Warren kissed her with such tenderness that Rose openly wept with joy. The celebration back at the ranch was simple but heartfelt. Rose had cooked a feast, and several neighbors brought dishes to share. Jake played his fiddle, and they danced in the barn as the sun set, Warren holding Penelope close and marveling at how his life had changed so completely in such a short time. That night, Warren carried Penelope over the threshold of the house that was now officially hers too. He had moved his things from the master bedroom to a guest room weeks ago, wanting to give her privacy and space. But now she was his wife, and they would share that room and that bed and their lives together. Warren set her down gently, his hands resting on her waist. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "I know everything has happened so fast. If you need more time, I understand." Penelope reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "I am sure. I love you, Warren. I think I started falling in love with you that first night in the cabin when you gave me your bedroll and stayed up all night keeping watch. You have been my shelter through every kind of storm, and now I want to be yours too." Warren kissed her then, deeply and passionately, and she responded with equal fervor. They made love slowly and tenderly, learning each other's bodies, taking their time to explore and discover. Penelope had been frightened at first, the memories of her ordeal still too close. But Warren was patient and gentle, and gradually her fear melted away, replaced by desire and trust and love. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, the window open to let in the cool night breeze. Warren traced patterns on Penelope's bare shoulder, marveling at how right this felt, how complete he felt with her beside him. "Tell me about your dreams," Penelope said sleepily, her head resting on his chest. "What do you want for our future?" "I want to keep building this ranch into something lasting," Warren said. "Something we can pass down to our children someday if we are blessed with them. I want to wake up every morning beside you and fall asleep every night the same way. I want to grow old with you, Penelope, and look back on a life well lived together." "That sounds perfect," Penelope said. "I want that too, all of it." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, safe and warm and deeply in love. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Warren's life. Penelope proved to be a natural with the horses, and she started spending more and more time in the barn and corrals, learning from Jake and developing her own skills. Warren loved watching her work, loved the way she spoke softly to the animals and handled them with confidence and care. She also transformed the house, adding touches that made it warmer and more welcoming. Curtains appeared in windows, rugs on floors, flowers in vases on tables. She and Rose worked together to can vegetables and fruits for the winter, and the pantry filled with jars of preserves and pickles. The ranch had always been successful, but now it felt like a true home, full of life and love and laughter. There was difficult news, too. Marshall Granger sent word that he had tracked down 2 of the 4 outlaws who had attacked the stage. There had been a shootout when they resisted arrest, and both men were killed. A third man had been captured alive and was awaiting trial. The fourth, the young one who had helped Penelope escape, had apparently disappeared, and there was speculation that he had left the territory entirely. Penelope cried when she heard the news, not for the men who were dead but for the violence of it all, for her uncle who had died trying to protect her. Warren held her through her tears, understanding that some wounds took a long time to heal, that the fear and trauma of what she had endured would always be a part of her story. But he also saw her strength, saw how she refused to let that experience define her entire life. She had survived, and she was building something beautiful from the ashes of that terrible time. Winter came, cold and harsh, and the ranch work slowed. Warren and Jake spent their days caring for the horses and cattle, making sure they all had enough feed and water. Penelope and Rose worked on projects inside, sewing and cooking and planning for spring. The evenings were the best part, when they all gathered around the fireplace in the main house, talking and laughing and playing cards. It was during one of those cozy winter evenings that Penelope told Warren she was pregnant. They were alone in their bedroom, getting ready for sleep, when she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There is a baby growing in here," she said, her eyes shining with a mixture of joy and nervousness. "Our baby. I think I am about 2 months along." Warren felt like his heart might burst from happiness. He kissed her thoroughly, then knelt down and pressed a gentle kiss to her stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I am your father and I cannot wait to meet you," Penelope laughed, running her fingers through his hair. "You are going to be a wonderful father." "I hope so. I am going to try my hardest, that is for sure." He stood and pulled her into his arms. "Thank you for this. For choosing me, for building this life with me, for giving me a family." "Thank you for finding me in that storm," Penelope said. "Thank you for being my shelter." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Penelope was sick in the mornings for the first few months. Rose fussed over her constantly, making sure she ate enough and rested enough. Jake built a beautiful cradle in his workshop, carving horses into the wood. Warren found himself daydreaming about the future, about teaching his son or daughter to ride, about watching them grow up on this ranch that meant so much to him. One warm day in early April, Marshal Granger rode out to the ranch with unexpected news. The third outlaw, the one who had been captured alive, had been convicted and sentenced to hang. But before his execution, he had given information about the fourth man, the young one who had helped Penelope escape. "His name is Billy Carson," Granger said as they stood on the porch. "He was just 19 when all this happened. Fell in with a bad crowd after his parents died. According to the man we caught, Billy left the gang right after he helped Miss Barrett, now Mrs. Lancaster, escape. Said he could not live with what they had done. Last anyone heard, he had headed north to Montana, looking for honest work." Penelope, who had come out to hear the news, was quiet for a long moment. "I hope he found it," she said finally. "He saved my life. I hope he managed to turn his around." "That is generous of you," Granger said. "Most people would not have any sympathy for someone who rode with men like that." "He was young and made terrible choices," Penelope said. "But he also did the right thing in the end, even though it put him at risk. I cannot hate him for that. I just hope he found a better path." After Granger left, Warren put his arm around Penelope's shoulders. "You have a good heart." "I have had second chances," she said. "I was lost and alone and terrified, and you found me and gave me a chance at a new life. Billy Carson gave me that chance first by helping me escape. I like to think that means something." Summer arrived in full force, hot and dry. Penelope's pregnancy became obvious, her belly rounding out beautifully. She had to stop riding and doing some of the heavier chores, which frustrated her, but Warren and Jake picked up the slack without complaint. Rose made her sit down and rest more, bringing her cold drinks and fussing over her like a mother hen. In late August, when the heat was at its peak, Penelope went into labor. It was a long and difficult birth, lasting nearly 20 hours. Warren paced the floor downstairs while Rose attended to Penelope upstairs, with Jake keeping him company and trying to distract him from his worry. Every time Penelope cried out in pain, Warren flinched, wishing desperately that he could take her place, could bear this burden for her. But finally, just as dawn was breaking, a baby's cry filled the house. Rose appeared at the top of the stairs, her face tired but radiant. "It is a boy," she called down. "A big, healthy boy, and Penelope is tired but doing well. Come meet your son, Warren." Warren took the stairs 2 at a time and rushed into the bedroom. Penelope lay propped up on pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but glowing with happiness. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket, and as Warren approached, she pulled the blanket back to reveal a red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair. "Meet William Charles Lancaster," Penelope said softly. "William for you and Charles for my uncle." Warren sat on the edge of the bed and reached out with a trembling hand to touch his son's tiny fingers. The baby grasped his finger with surprising strength, and Warren felt tears spill down his cheeks. "He is perfect," Warren whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Penelope. Thank you for him, for us, for everything. We made him together," Penelope said, leaning her head on Warren's shoulder. "He is ours." Baby William proved to be a healthy, happy child. He had his mother's dark hair and his father's blue eyes, and he was doted on by everyone on the ranch. Rose was like a grandmother to him, always ready to hold him and coo over him. Jake carved him toys and built him a small rocking horse for when he got bigger. Warren was a devoted father, getting up with Penelope for night feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just holding his son and marveling at the miracle of him. As William grew from an infant into a toddler, the ranch continued to thrive. Warren's reputation for raising quality horses spread, and buyers came from all over the territory to purchase from him. He hired on 2 more hands to help with the increased workload, young men who lived in the bunkhouse Jake had built near the barn. Penelope found her place as the heart of the ranch, managing the household and the finances with skill and grace. She kept the books, managed the correspondence with buyers, and made sure everyone was fed and cared for. She also continued working with the horses when William was napping or being watched by Rose, and she became known for having a special gift with the difficult ones, the skittish mares and the stubborn geldings that needed a gentle but firm hand. When William was 2, Penelope became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and she felt stronger throughout. In the spring of 1882, she gave birth to a daughter they named Margaret Rose Lancaster, after the business partner's wife who had tried to be kind, even if she had not really wanted the responsibility, and after Rose, who had become family in every way that mattered. Margaret, called Maggie from the start, was a beautiful baby with blonde hair and green eyes that seemed to come from some distant ancestor. She was calmer than William had been, content to sit and watch the world around her with wide, curious eyes. William adored his little sister, always wanting to help with her care, bringing her toys and sitting beside her cradle to sing nonsense songs that made her smile. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Warren and Penelope's love deepened with each passing year. They still took time to sit on the porch together in the evenings, talking about their day and their dreams. Warren still saw Penelope as the remarkable woman he had found in that storm all those years ago, and Penelope still marveled at how this strong, gentle man had become her shelter in every kind of weather. when William was 5 and Maggie was 3, Warren decided to expand the ranch even further. He bought an adjacent property, adding another 300 acres to their holdings. It was a big investment, but the ranch was doing well enough to support it. He and Jake worked together to build additional corrals and a second barn on the new land. Penelope surprised everyone, including herself, by deciding she wanted to start training horses professionally. She had been working with them informally for years, but now she wanted to make it official, to have her own string of horses that she trained and sold under her own name. Warren supported her completely, and together they built a reputation as a team, Warren for breeding and raising quality stock, Penelope for training them to be steady, reliable partners for whatever work was needed. The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. Birthdays and holidays, roundups and foaling seasons, harsh winters and beautiful summers. William grew into a tall, serious boy who loved working with his father and learning everything he could about ranching. Maggie became a bright, spirited girl who was fearless around the horses and could ride before she could barely walk. In 1885, Penelope gave birth one more time, to another son they named Jacob Michael Lancaster, after Jake and the Archangel. Jake cried when they told him the baby's name, overcome with emotion at the honor. Little Jacob, called Jake Jr. from the start, was a wild child from birth, always getting into things and keeping everyone on their toes. Rose and Jake aged gracefully, their hair going completely white but their spirits staying young. They were grandparents in all but name to the Lancaster children, present for every milestone and celebration. When Jake Jr. was 2, Jake Sr. decided it was time to slow down a bit, and Warren hired another foreman to take over some of his duties. But Jake still came to the barn every day, unable to stay away from the horses that had been his life's work. In the summer of 1888, when William was 10, Maggie was 8, and Jake Jr. was 3, the Lancaster family took their first real trip away from the ranch. They traveled to San Francisco, taking the train west so Penelope could show Warren the city she had heard about growing up in California. It was a grand adventure, the children wide-eyed at the size of the city and the ocean beyond it. But after 2 weeks, they were all ready to go home, to the ranch that was the center of their world. Warren and Penelope stood on the porch of their hotel the night before they left, looking out at the Pacific Ocean stretching to the horizon. "You ever regret it?" Warren asked quietly. "Staying in Wyoming instead of going back to California, building a life on a ranch instead of in a city?" Penelope turned to him with a smile that was full of love and certainty. "Never. Not for a single moment. You gave me exactly what I said I wanted that day we talked on the porch, remember? You gave me a life that matters, with someone who sees me and loves me for exactly who I am. You gave me a home where I wake up every morning and know I am exactly where I am supposed to be. How could I ever regret that?" Warren pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I found you hiding from a storm, and you changed my entire life. You took a lonely ranch and turned it into a home. You gave me children and love and a purpose beyond just working and surviving. I am the one who should be grateful." "Then we are both grateful," Penelope said, "and both blessed." They returned to Wyoming and to the ranch that had become so much more than Warren had ever imagined when he first started building it. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also deep joys. William eventually took over more and more of the ranch operations as Warren got older, proving to have his father's gift with horses and his mother's business sense. Maggie married a neighboring rancher's son when she was 20, a good man who treated her like a queen and joined the Lancaster ranch operation rather than taking her away from her family. Jake Jr., true to his wild nature, joined the cavalry like his father had, though he promised to come back and settle down eventually. Rose passed away peacefully in her sleep in the winter of 1895, with Jake holding her hand. Jake followed her less than a year later, his heart giving out while he was sitting in the barn, a place he had loved all his life. Warren and Penelope mourned them deeply, their children mourning the only grandparents they had really known. But life continued, as it always did. Grandchildren arrived, first from William, who married a schoolteacher from Cheyenne, then from Maggie and her husband. The ranch house filled with noise and laughter again, just as it had when Warren and Penelope's children were young. Warren and Penelope became the beloved grandparents, teaching the new generation to ride and work with horses, telling stories about the old days. On a warm summer evening in 1905, Warren and Penelope sat on the porch together, watching the sun set over the ranch they had built together. They were both in their 50s now, their hair streaked with gray, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work. But their love was as strong as ever, maybe even stronger, tempered and deepened by all the years they had walked through together. "You remember that storm?" Penelope asked, taking Warren's hand in hers. "The night you found me." "I remember everything about that night," Warren said. "I remember being annoyed at getting caught in the rain. I remember seeing something move near that old cabin. I remember finding a terrified young woman pointing an empty gun at me." "I was so scared," Penelope said. "I thought I would never feel safe again. And then you appeared, this cowboy in the storm, and you became my shelter. Not just that night, but every night since. Through every storm, every challenge, every moment of fear or uncertainty, you have been my constant, Warren Lancaster." "And you have been mine," Warren said. "You took a man who was just going through the motions and gave him a reason to really live. You gave me love and family and a home that is so much more than just buildings and land. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Penelope." They sat together in comfortable silence, holding hands and watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Around them, their ranch hummed with life. Horses grazed in the pastures, smoke rose from the chimney of the house where their children and grandchildren were preparing supper, and the land stretched out in every direction, beautiful and wild and full of possibility. Warren had found Penelope hiding from a storm all those years ago, a terrified woman with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. He had offered her shelter, expecting nothing in return, but she had given him everything. She had given him purpose and passion, had given him children and grandchildren, had given him decades of love and partnership and joy. He had been her shelter in every kind of weather. But she had been his home, his heart, his whole world. And as they sat together watching the sunset on another beautiful day in the life they had built together, Warren knew that finding her in that storm had been the most fortunate moment of his entire life. Everything good, everything meaningful, everything that truly mattered had flowed from that one night when fate or providence or just simple luck had brought them together. "I love you," Penelope said softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I love you too," Warren replied, wrapping his arm around her and holding her close. "Always have, always will." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat together on the porch of their home, surrounded by the life and love they had created, knowing that they had been blessed beyond measure. They had found each other in a storm, and they had become each other's shelter, each other's safe harbor, each other's forever home. The ranch continued to thrive under William's management, with Warren serving as an advisor and consultant, still deeply involved, but happy to let the next generation take the lead. Penelope continued working with the horses well into her 60s, unable to give up the work that had become such a vital part of who she was. Together, Warren and Penelope became the patriarch and matriarch of not just their family but of the whole community, respected for their wisdom, their generosity, and their enduring love for each other. When they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary in 1909, the whole town of Cheyenne seemed to turn out for the party. It was held at the ranch, with long tables set up in the yard, music and dancing, and more food than anyone could possibly eat. Their children and grandchildren presented them with a beautiful photograph album filled with pictures from throughout the years, capturing moments from their life together. As Warren and Penelope looked through the album that night, alone in their bedroom after all the guests had gone, they marveled at how rich their life had been. There were pictures of their wedding day, of their children as babies and then growing up, of the ranch expanding and changing over the years, of holidays and birthdays and ordinary moments that had become extraordinary in retrospect. "We have had a good life," Penelope said, closing the album and setting it carefully on the bedside table. "We have had a wonderful life," Warren corrected. "And it is not over yet. We have got years ahead of us still." And they did. Years of watching grandchildren grow and great-grandchildren arrive. Years of continuing to work on the ranch, though at a slower pace as their bodies aged. Years of sitting on that porch every evening, holding hands and watching the sunset, talking about everything and nothing. Warren passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1918, at the age of 72. He had spent his last day doing what he loved, working with the horses and walking the land that had been his life's work. Penelope was beside him when he died, holding his hand just as she had held it countless times over the decades they had spent together. The loss was devastating, but Penelope took comfort in knowing that they had been given so much time together, so many years of love and partnership. She continued living at the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, still sharp and active despite her grief. She lived another 5 years, passing away in the winter of 1923 at the age of 67. In those final years, she often spoke of Warren, of the night he had found her in the storm, of the life they had built together. She told her grandchildren that she had been blessed beyond measure, that she had been given a love story that some people never found, and that she would carry it with her beyond this life. When Penelope died, she was buried beside Warren in a peaceful cemetery overlooking the ranch they had loved. Their headstone was simple but perfect, reading, "Warren Lancaster and Penelope Lancaster, beloved husband and wife, parents and grandparents. He was her shelter, she was his home." The ranch continued through the generations, passed down from parents to children, always staying in the Lancaster family. And the story of how it began, with a cowboy finding a woman hiding from a storm and offering her shelter that became so much more, was told and retold, becoming family legend. It was a story of love found in the darkest circumstances, of trust built slowly and carefully, of two people who had been strangers becoming each other's whole world. It was a story that proved that sometimes the storms we face lead us exactly where we are supposed to be, to the people we are supposed to be with, to the lives we are meant to live. Warren had found Penelope hiding from a storm, and in doing so, he had found his destiny. She had found shelter in him, and in return, she had given him a home and a family and a love that lasted not just a lifetime but beyond, echoing through the generations that came after them. And long after they were gone, the ranch still stood, the horses still ran in the pastures, and the porch still offered a perfect view of the Wyoming sunset. The storm that had brought them together had passed long ago, but the shelter they had built together, the love they had created, the family and legacy they had established. Those things endured, solid and strong and unshakable. A testament to two people who had found each other when they needed it most, and had chosen to build a beautiful life together from that one chance meeting on a stormy night so many years ago.